AFN Evening News.
A showdown shaping up at the UN, Joe.
And baseball top sports tonight. The banger from Binger continues to bang away. Randy?
Joe, we have some cooler weather to look forward to on Friday and through the weekend with a continuing chance for some rain showers. Dee Dee?
Cartoonists on strike, hip joints in place, and Zeppelins remembered. All part of tonight's Journal.
AFN News, from the wires of the AP and UPI with videotape reports from the ABC network.
The Palestine Liberation Organization's UN observer says he'll call for a special meeting of the Security Council if America vetoes a resolution recognizing the rights of Palestinians in the Middle East. And the U.S. is expected to do just that when the measure comes up for a vote, probably tomorrow. This is a dramatic shift in White House policy on the Middle East. Ted Koppel reports there's confusion over who's calling the shots.
Koppel, ABC News, Washington.
A former mental patient gave up without a struggle today at the end of a hijacking drama that involved a United Airlines jet with 120 people aboard. The man boarded the plane in Portland, then forced it to fly to San Francisco, and then returned to Portland, where he surrendered. He said he had a bomb, but no explosives were found. Maryland residents are warned not to pick up any hitchhikers today. They could be dangerous criminals escaped from the Maryland House of Corrections in Jessup. Some 33 inmates are part of the state's second largest prison escape last night. They cut through security screens, then scaled a 15-foot wall and 3 fences. 16 are still at large, and the union claims that there are too few guards. Hardly a day goes by that someone doesn't rob a bank in New York City. There have been more than 570 bank robberies in the Big Apple this year. James Walker reports that authorities are having a tough time controlling the problem because banks have changed the way they're doing business.
It seems as easy as stealing candy from a baby. 17. James Walker, ABC News, New York.
Confessed killer Jesse Bishop is scheduled to die Monday in Nevada's gas chamber. His former lawyers are trying to stop that date with death, and Bishop is trying to stop them from meddling. He says he prefers death to the agony of the repeated stays of execution. President Carter and the Delta Queen are fast approaching Mark Twain country. The President and his family are on the 7th and final full day of their cruise down the Mississippi. And the sternwheeler will make a stop today in Hannibal, Missouri, boyhood home of Mark Twain. Sam Donaldson catches up with the President in Iowa.
Here it comes, flying the presidential flag, the Delta Queen to Davenport, Iowa. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, with the President on the Mississippi.
President Carter ends his Delta Queen voyage tomorrow in St. Louis, and in a dazzling feat of public relations juggling, the 10 millionth visitor to the Gateway Arch will appear on the riverfront at the same time as Mr. Carter. The lucky person will receive a model of the arch presented by the President. As Mr. Carter floats down the river, some recent polls are suggesting that his popularity is also floating away. An ABC Harris poll shows 84% of the American people don't have confidence in his handling of the economy. But Mr. Carter is getting some advice. Former President Nixon says, ignore the polls.
My only advice to him would be anyone. Whether President Carter can do that, I do not know.
On the labor scene, thousands of commuters will be stranded tonight if angry Bay Area rapid transit employees abandon their jobs in a dispute over employment conditions. Also ready to walk out in Hollywood are those people responsible for the Saturday morning cartoon shows. The artists complain that most of the work is going to foreign cartoonists. The full story coming up on the Journal. It's back to school soon for most American children, and back to the picket line for teachers in at least 4 states. AFN's Paul Macco tells where.
More than 1,000 public school teachers are off the job in Oklahoma City in the first strike of its kind ever staged in Oklahoma. Classes for reporting for AFN.
The Presidential Commission looking into the accident at 3 Mile Island hears today from the top staffers at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The probe has been centering on whether the NRC should have been able to see trouble coming based on problems at other nuclear power plants. And Pennsylvania Governor Dick Thornburgh appeared before the commission with another complaint.
Pennsylvania Governor Richard Thornburgh, ABC News, Washington.
The Reverend Bernard Pagano has been praying for a miracle, and today it came true. The Catholic priest, dubbed the Gentleman Bandit, has been charged with a number of armed robberies in Delaware. Today, another man pleaded guilty to those crimes. So all the charges against Pagano were dropped, and Delaware officials have publicly apologized for his arrest and trial. There's a big investigation underway in Thailand. Richard Anderson reports that officials are trying to determine what caused the worst rail disaster in the country's history.
Officials have found at least 60. ABC News.
A subway train derailed in Moscow today, injuring several people. Confirmation of that accident was unusual for the Soviets because they rarely report disasters or accidents. But there is word today also about another perennial Soviet problem, bad harvests. And Garbles reports that the Soviets are anticipating a food shortage.
The Soviets don't speculate in public, but U.S. officials say the Russian... ABC News, Moscow.
Remember the $30,000 home? Well, you probably won't find one being built today in your average suburban tract. What we used to think of as the $30,000 home is now going for $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the area. The boom in real estate prices is causing many people to take a second look at a mobile home. Dennis Roper reports sales have increased 20% in the last 18 months because people like what they're seeing.
Analyst says people think for ABC News, St. Petersburg, Florida.
For 6 years now, the U.S. spacecraft Pioneer 11 has been hurtling through space towards Saturn. But there are problems. Chunks of natural space debris like ice and dust and boulders may destroy the Pioneer next week. But if it survives, here's a report on what the satellite will see and record.
The Pioneer 11 space probe at ABC News, Washington.
Back down to Earth and sports next with Joe Schmidberger.
AFN Television, Germany.
AFN Television News.
House members chicken out on a pay raise. Mike?
And nothing foul about the way the California Angels are taking care of things in their own division. They're beating their opponents head on. These stories and more coming up next.
AFN News, from the wires of the AP and UPI with videotape reports from the ABC network.
The House today voted to give itself a 7% pay raise, and then minutes later, members voted to kill the bill it was attached to. And they had to go on record by name. That leaves members of Congress at their current $57,500 level, but they soon get an automatic 12.9% cost of living increase. An undisclosed amount of highly enriched uranium that could be used to make an atomic bomb could be missing from a nuclear power plant in Irwin, Tennessee. Federal officials say that for now they believe the loss of 20 pounds of uranium isn't a loss at all, but just an accounting error. But they've shut down the facility and ordered an investigation. Representatives of Air Canada say that stress crack in a DC-9 that lost its tail cone after takeoff from Boston yesterday showed up in X-rays taken 4 months ago. But the airline says the crack was overlooked during maintenance. Meanwhile, the Federal Aviation Administration has ordered all airplanes with DC-9s that have logged more than 15,000 landings to check those planes for stress cracks similar to those found on the 3 Air Canada jets. United States says it has reached an apparent agreement with Egypt and Israel on a Sinai peacekeeping force. Washington officials say the agreement involves use of American observers. Barry Dunsmore reports on what's still to be accomplished before the Middle East settlement is considered complete.
More ABC News, the State Department.
A bomb set by PLO terrorists tore through a crowded shopping mall in Jerusalem today. One person was killed, 34 were wounded. It was the worst bombing in Jerusalem this year. The UN General Assembly's Credentials Committee has upheld the claim by ousted Cambodian Premier Pol Pot to a seat on the Assembly and has denied the rival claim of the regime that ousted him. Pol Pot and his forces are fighting a guerrilla war against the Vietnam-backed regime in Phnom Penh. In London, the Zimbabwe-Rhodesia peace talks are continuing with indications that some progress is being made. Black guerrilla leaders are reportedly softening their demands. But the slim chance of a settlement in Rhodesia doesn't seem to be enough to keep the white Rhodesians from fleeing that country. Richard Anderson looks into the white exodus.
Richard Anderson, ABC News, Salisbury, Zimbabwe, Rhodesia.
The top-ranking Republican on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Jacob Javits of New York, says he feels that the controversy of the Soviet combat brigade in Cuba has abated, and he feels a compromise with the Russians will soon be reached. John Scally reports that administration sources are considering a number of options to put the economic or military squeeze on the Russians if they refuse to resolve that troops issue.
Officials have now started to consider ABC News Washington.
The Pentagon hasn't been able to recruit enough people to staff the all-volunteer Army, so military has decided to take high school dropouts with less than a 10th grade education. Male recruits in that category will be accepted as of October 1st, female dropouts at a later date. Gold prices fell back a bit from yesterday's high marks on the big London and Zurich exchanges. The close today, $370 on both exchanges. One expert said the gold market is going to go cold turkey for a little bit. The dollar, meanwhile, held steady against major world currencies. Here in Germany, tomorrow's military rate remains 1 mark 79. The dollar slipped back a little bit, but not enough to change the rate. A dozen fires in Southern California brushlands have forced the evacuation of hundreds of families. Thousands of firefighters are battling the flames, fanned by erratic winds and record heat. Stephen Gear talked with owners whose homes fell victim to spreading flames. Efforts to end the big teacher strikes in San Francisco and Detroit continue, and there are scores of other strikes still in progress. The National Education Association reports almost 39,000 teachers on the picket lines, affecting 825,000 students in 11 states. Residents of Miami and 16 other communities in Dade County, Florida, have soundly defeated a mistakenly worded proposal that would have cut taxes by better than 99%. Rebecca Chase explains the original proposal was for a much smaller cut, but an error in the wording wasn't discovered until it was too late to change the ballot.
Harry Wilson and his Tax Revolt Committee are responsible for ABC News, Miami.
Officials in Memphis say they may have to exhume the body of rock and roll king Elvis Presley and subpoena his autopsy papers. They want to get to the bottom of those reports that he received huge quantities of drugs from his doctor before he died. Sports next with Mike Allwood.
AFN Television News, compiled from the major U.S. networks and wire services.
Good evening. The presidential primaries are over, but it looks like the battle for the Democratic nomination is just beginning. President Carter had hoped to knock Senator Edward Kennedy out of the running with a sweep of yesterday's 8 primaries, but Kennedy was the big winner. Mr. Carter did earn more than enough delegates to be nominated. The Kennedy people are not so sure that the president can hold on to them at the convention in August. A report on the primaries from AFN's Charles Lutz.
To hear President Carter and Senator AFN News.
2 years ago, California put a new expression in the nation's political vocabulary, taxpayers' revolt. But times change. And in voting yesterday, Californians who cut property taxes 57% in 1978 rejected a proposal to cut their income taxes in half. Opponents said the measure favored the very wealthy. Those who work in the nation's automobile industry don't count themselves among the economically fortunate these days. More and more are finding themselves out of work as domestic auto sales plummet and foreign imports take a bigger and bigger chunk of the market. But there's a town in Ohio that's already making a foreign motorcycle and is looking ahead to the day when it will host a foreign automobile plant as well. Details from Ed Ross.
Marysville, Ohio News. This is Ed Ross reporting.
A new study on who's buying homes in the U.S. indicates for the first time a home-buying family needs 2 incomes to make those monthly mortgage payments. A survey by the United States League of Savings Associations indicates that the average cost of maintaining a home nowadays stands at $550 a month, and the price of the average home rose to $58,000 last year. Good news for those who have to borrow money. Chase Manhattan, the nation's 3rd largest bank, cut its prime rate a full point, down to 13%. Grand Island, Nebraska is a disaster area today. The city was struck by 7 tornadoes last night, and officials have hardly begun to figure the losses. There's also some confusion over the death toll. One county official puts the dead at 35, but other officials, including the mayor and the governor, have not been able to confirm that. It is agreed that about 130 people were injured and 100 buildings destroyed. President Carter has reportedly agreed to take several steps to deal with the problems created by the influx of Cuban refugees into the United States. He's agreed to